Ozzy reveals he has Parkinson's, Fender is fined £4.5 million, and a man finds a python inside of his acoustic guitar, all next on Shitpost Friday. Today's video is sponsored by Native Sons Goods, makers of the best woven guitar, bag, and camera straps on planet Earth. And now the best is even better with a new line of hand-woven Maya Serape straps with USA organic herringbone hemp backing. Get 10% off when you use the link in the description, and remember, when you support my sponsor, you support this channel, and I sure appreciate it.
Hey y'all, it's Shitpost Friday!
How's it going, everybody? Brad the Guitarologist here. It is time again for Shitpost Friday. First up in the news, I usually like to get all of the sad stuff out of the way, and this week we had a couple of bits of sad news. First off, we had David Olney dies on stage during a performance at a Florida festival. He was 71 years old. He basically just fell silent almost in the middle of a song and dropped his head and said, "I'm sorry," and just passed away right there on stage. It took a while for anybody to really realize that he was dying or he was dead, and you know, at first it was kind of a bit uncomfortable. I guess the audience kind of shuffled around a bit, thinking maybe it was part of the show. You know, a couple people said we should try to revive him, and they couldn't, alas. So yeah, David Olney, who Townes Van Sant once said was his favorite songwriter, has died at the age of 71. Pretty sad. Also, Mexican guitarist Chamin Correa has died at the age of 90. He actually played a smaller form of the classical guitar, which is called a requinto. And I'd never heard of one of these before, and I looked it up, and yeah, it's basically like a smaller guitar, and I think it's actually tuned slightly differently as well. Let me see. It is tuned A, D, G, C, E, and A. So interesting. It's tuned to A rather than E standard. So I guess you learn something every day, but yeah, too bad someone had to pass away for me to learn that. Also, in what I definitely classify as sad news this week, an Australian man's prized collection of guitars was consumed by the flames that are going on down there right now. Of course, if you guys have followed the news, the international news stories coming out of Australia, we've got 13 million acres of land have been destroyed, more than 1,300 homes. Just absolute devastation. I can't imagine losing everything I had, losing my home, even, you know, losing family and stuff like that, man. There's a lot of 18 people have died in all these fires. You know, there's been a lot of reports coming out that a lot of these fires have been deliberately started. A heat wave is bad. Yes, a drought is bad. But when you get people who are going out there deliberately trying to start fires, you get problems like this. And it's just really sad that anyone would even think of such a thing. But apparently, I don't know. I don't know what kind of world we live in, to be honest, anymore. Hardly. And just some days I'm just blown away by some of the news stories I read and the things I read, and just really sad. But yeah, this man has lost 65 of his 70 Hofner guitars. He had a massive Hofner collection. And yeah, if you're interested in some of the stuff that was in Mike's collection that was destroyed, I'm not sure which, you know, which of the guitars that he was able to save, but you can actually go on vintagehofner.co.uk, and any of you guys who are Hofner collectors, you will know this website. It's pretty much the place to go if you're a Hofner collector to, you know, see what models were produced of vintage Hofners, and to see, you know, other people's collections and the like. But there is a whole page on this website dedicated to Mike's collection. I presume what he had at the time that was created, which was just a handful of guitars, but it's some of the best guitars that Hofner ever produced. Here's a 1956 Committee, and just a beautiful, gorgeous guitar. And the thing about Hofner's is, if you wanted to get into collecting vintage guitars, I really couldn't recommend a better brand to start collecting, just because the fact that they are German guitars means that they aren't as widely collected in the United States. They are collected a lot in the UK, which is why I think this website is from the UK. A lot of Hofners were imported into the UK back in the day, so you'll find a lot more of them there. And as you guys probably already know, a lot of people who are went on to become great guitar players. People like Eric Clapton, I think he had one early on in his career. George Harrison of the Beatles started out on a Hofner, as did David Gilmour of Pink Floyd. He started out on a Hofner. But yeah, man, I can't recommend any better brand to kind of collect because they're really undervalued for what they are. I mean, if you look at old Hofner guitars, man, they're really well made. And they're just underappreciated in the United States for some reason. And like I said, I think that reason really is that there just never was a whole lot of them in this country back in the day. You can still get them for a lot cheaper than equivalent vintage guitars for sure. And I mean, as far as looking into the future, I can really only see the stock in vintage Hofners going up over time because they're just really cool guitars. Like this one right here, man, I would love to have a club like that. The two Hofners I have a really cool bass, vintage bass, and I have a really cool old violin Beatles, Super Beatle guitar, which they didn't make a whole lot of. But yeah, man, just really sad that this guy's entire collection is now gone. But here's a couple of the things that he did have. And yeah, man, underappreciated guitars and really sad for Mike. But yeah, I really feel bad about this because, old Hofners are kind of hard to come by anymore, it seems. And just to, for those to be taken out of circulation, in effect, is really sad. And, not to mention the man's entire home, so really sad for him, man. And like I said, hopefully everybody that watches this channel and you're down under, man, I wish all of you guys the very, very best. Hopefully nobody loses their homes that watch this channel. I'll pray for you guys, man. Also, while we're down under, I figured we would skip over to New Zealand and check out this news. This man found a huge python inside his guitar. Sunshine Coast snake catchers were called out to this man's house, and they found inside his acoustic guitar a carpet python. It doesn't say how long the thing was, but there's a picture of it. You could see pictures from their Facebook page. And yeah, man, I think I would be quite freaked out if I picked up my acoustic guitar one day and felt it was a little bit heavier than usual and looked down inside and there was a freaking snake in it. That's about the last thing you want to see inside your guitar. I can't think of it. I can think of nothing else, actually. Nothing comes to mind that would be scarier than a snake inside my guitar. I think that'd be about the worst. If you guys can think of anything scarier inside your guitar, let me know down below, but that's about the limit for me. I think I might even consider quitting guitar at that point. The funniest part of this article to me, the man immediately dropped the instrument and called the snake catcher. A snake catcher named Justin arrived at the scene and rescued the python before relocating it. Well, I think more like he rescued the man than the python. Speaking of losses of guitars, a Florida man has just been arrested after stealing guitars signed by Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Van Halen, U2, and Paul McCartney, among others, in Daytona Beach, Florida.
We were called out to the Hyde Park Storage Suites on West ISB on December 20th, and two people who had rented a storage unit at that facility had reached out to us and told us that they were missing some items from their unit. So we went out there to investigate, and as it turns out, we had discovered, along with, once they had done an inventory of the unit, that there was at least 8 guitars that were missing from that unit. Electric guitars, most of them are Fenders, and many of them had been signed guitars. We're talking artists like Bob Dylan, U2, Paul McCartney, artists like that is basically very valuable stuff. And we got a hit this morning at a pawn shop. The OK Pawn Shop off of MMB is where we ended up going, where we ended up finding at least one of the guitars, the Van Halen guitar.
So he was caught when he tried to sell one of these guitars at OK Pawn Shop. This guy's a 43-year-old man. And what is it about people of this kind of age, man? It's got to be drugs, because once you get to this age, I'm 42, so once you get to my age, 42, 43, you should be way over this kind of stuff, this kind of juvenile behavior. And if you're not, there's something really majorly wrong with you, man. You've got something off in the head. Whatever it is, there are better ways to address it than going and stealing a bunch of guitars. Check yourself into rehab, whatever it is you got to do, but, get off the drugs and turn your life around, dude. It's not worth it. So anyway, he tried to pawn this guitar that was the one signed by members of Van Halen that was valued at over $2,000 for $200. He tried to pawn it for, and that's probably the tip-off that he was only asking $200. But then again, $2,000. I'm not even. It looks like a generic. I don't know. It looks a bit like a generic guitar to me, so I don't know if it would even be worth that. But what do I know? I don't know a whole lot about the collector's market on things like signatures. On signatures and stuff, man, that brings up a good point. You can get a cheap first act guitar signed by, virtually anybody, and the thing is going to be worth about what a cheap first act guitar is probably going to be worth because, signatures are just almost impossible to validate anyway. Unless you're the expert, you're probably not going to be able to validate the signature, and they're so easy to fake, and people do try to fake them all the time, and when they do try to fake them, it's always on cheap guitars. So, that it's kind of a big problem, and I would never consider investing in something like that because you're always going to get burned. Even if you are an expert, there's going to come a day when your expertise fails you, and you're going to get burned on something eventually. So I stay away from that kind of stuff, just as a general rule. But a good thing that this guy got nabbed because, yeah, he stole a bunch of stuff here. Blue Fender electric guitar signed by the Rolling Stones, which I imagine if that, had some kind of authentication or photographs of them signing it or something like that to back it up, some kind of provenance, yeah, it would be worth $3,600 like they're claiming here. But otherwise, I'd be very dubious. A dark green burst guitar signed by Bob Dylan worth $1,600. An American flag guitar signed by Bruce Springsteen for about $3,200. So Bruce Springsteen alone is $3,200, but the Rolling Stones is $36. I don't think that makes much sense. But what do I know? Black Fender Electric signed by Eric Clapton worth $3,000. A Fender Electric signed by U2 for about $3,000, and one by Paul McCartney for about $2,100. So yeah, a lot of stuff, man. He got a lot of stuff. And speaking of expensive and guitars, Fender has finally been fined £4.5 million by the British Competition and Markets Authority. We have been following this story now for, I think, about a year, maybe a year and a half. I've reported on this story several times as different developments have occurred. It took them forever to it seemed like, to even get the investigation underway. I think it was about a year before they even made a single update to the investigation this past spring. But they finally have come to the point where they're fining Fender £4.5 million. And according to the law, as I understood it, I read it once, and it basically said that they were allowed to fine up to 10% of a guitar manufacturer, or any manufacturer's, annual turnover. So if if Fender's annual turnover is 45 million pounds, they are able to fine them this 4.5. And apparently this is the largest single fine ever levied against a manufacturer of any kind in the UK for retail price maintenance. Now, we discussed retail price maintenance and what it means at length in other videos, and I will point you to those. I'll put a card up here somewhere if you want to go check that out. But basically, just to recap, retail price maintenance is what we in the United States would call MAP pricing. That's minimum advertised pricing. So Fender has a scheme where they will set minimum advertised prices to all the dealers in their dealer network. And what that really does is it protects dealers from a race to the bottom in terms of pricing on advertising. So people don't spend they don't have to spend a whole lot of money trying to advertise against one another when they're all in the same dealer network. So it's, in my opinion, MAP pricing is a really good idea. It's a really good thing for the guitar industry. It prevents race toward the bottom in terms of prices, and it actually prevents a lot of manufacturers from going out of business because all of their dealers drive each other out of business until there's only a couple of dealers left. So rather than doing that to all their dealer network, they would rather set a minimum advertised price. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get the thing for less. It just means that you have to call up the place and ask them over the phone or ask them via email or whatever for a better price. That doesn't mean you can't get it at a better price. You just have to learn how to fucking negotiate, and you have to be an adult. You know what I mean? So, it kind of upsets me that the UK thinks that the citizens of the United Kingdom are not adults, and they don't know how to negotiate prices or call people up and ask for a better price. and they have to protect people from themselves in this kind of way. I don't understand it. But here in the United States, we understand minimum advertised pricing. I think most people who buy guitars here in this country do by now, and it's just second nature to ask for discounts at stores. Maybe that's a different culture in the UK. You just don't walk in places and ask for discounts maybe as readily as we would here, but whatever the case, I didn't agree with this, and I stand by Fender on this one. A lot of people, I'm sure, are going to jump and bash Fender and say, ha ha, Fender, look at the fine they've been levying. Well, no, I'm not one of those people. This is a situation where I would wholeheartedly side with Fender on this one, and I think the Competition and Markets Authority in the United Kingdom needs to be rethought, particularly after Brexit is finalized. I think the people of the UK would be better served by ridding itself of this regulatory body, because from what I can tell, if these are the biggest fines they've ever levied against a manufacturer, and it's just against a guitar manufacturer and like a keyboard manufacturer in the case of Casio, it's not worth it. It's ridiculous. So anyway, yeah, but on that, Casio was also fined $3.7 million for similar behavior. And the thing about Casio keyboards and keyboards in general, if you know anything about musical instrument retail, is keyboards are very, very hard to retail. And that's why, because for one thing, you see them in all the big box stores. You see them in Walmarts. You will see them in Best Buy, just all the big box stores that normally sell just about everything. Anything and everything else will also have a section with some keyboards in it. And that makes it very difficult if you're like a mom and pop store or even a Guitar Center to keep up with all the new innovations in keyboard technology too, because it's constantly changing. The ways in which technology of any kind interfaces with other technology is constantly changing. When some new thing like Bluetooth comes in, all the old technology becomes obsolete. When they get rid of certain connectors like FireWire connectors off of the new computers, certain old technologies become obsolete, and you have to replace all this stuff. Whenever they change operating systems to new operating systems, a lot of stuff becomes obsolete. So just to keep up with tech stuff, it's very, very difficult to do. Manufacturers have a hard time doing it. Retailers have a hard time doing it, and it's just doubly bad in the case of Casio, because if they can't maintain their retail pricing in this way, then they're really going to be screwed, because that means that all of their smaller dealers are going to be out of business. They will no longer be carrying Casio products. You're going to have to go probably to 2 or 3 big box stores in the UK, and that's probably the only places you're going to get Casio keyboards, unless you just go online and import them yourself or order them from somewhere else. My guess is that the large retail or large distributors were in on this. I think they are the ones who shopped these manufacturers into the CMA to begin with. I think because they wanted to be the sole distributors or the sole carriers of these products, they wanted to put everybody else out of business, and they're going to succeed as a result of this. And I think it hurts everybody. It hurts the consumer. It hurts the entire market as a whole. So that's my stance on that. I will not be wavered from it. If you guys have a different stance on it, feel free to say it below, but you're not going to change mine. Also, this past week, this is pretty sad news too. I might have even reported this in the beginning of the show, but Ozzy Osbourne has come out on Good Morning America with Sharon and admitted that he has Parkinson's disease. It's actually Parkin 2, and that's a lower form of Parkinson's. It's not quite as bad. It's not a death sentence like some forms of Parkinson's is, but still pretty bad. That Ozzy has this disease, and that he's going to have to deal with it. They did say that he's been in pain, quite a lot of pain recently. It was reported not all that long ago that Ozzy was dead. Somebody had reported on his death, and he and Sharon had to come out with a press release and say that no, he's not dead. But apparently, there's just like Ozzy said in this interview, he just kind of started running out of excuses for why He wasn't showing up at this or that, and things were happening, and he just had to finally come clean about having this disease. So on the heels of this announcement, it's also been announced that Sharon and Ozzy will both be presenting awards at this weekend's Grammy show. All the best to Ozzy. Hopefully he is able to manage this disease, not be in too much pain, and yeah, man, live for a good long time. Speaking of the Grammys, it's been reported that the drummer for Aerosmith is suing the band because he has been discluded from this weekend's Grammy performance. So Joey Kramer has, in his lawsuit, said he's not been emotionally or physically able to perform with the band, but he's suing them anyway for not being included on the Grammy performance. Aerosmith has said that he's had a lot of maladies, a lot of problems, and he hasn't been able to rehearse with the band. He was invited to some rehearsals to see if he could play with a click track and see if he was going to be okay. And apparently he hasn't turned up to some of the rehearsals that he was invited to, according to the band. So they have their side of the story as well. But I'm just curious, what do you guys think about this, of all that you've read? The thing is, it's like, I can understand a guy wanting to come back, but if you're physically unable to do it, and if you don't show up to rehearse on a show like the Grammys, man, you don't want to fall on your face in front of millions of people on live TV. I can totally understand where the rest of the band's coming from here. While I don't necessarily think they should kick the guy out, for having some troubles, and, they've been doing just fine with a replacement drummer, I still don't think that he's right to come back and sue him for this. But, I mean, I don't know necessarily all the details, but it just seems to me that, if the guy wanted to ensure that there becomes a rift between him and the band, then suing him is probably the fastest way to do that. If he really wants to come back, he should work to get back on his feet, do everything he can to manage his pain and all that stuff. But, how's the band supposed to, what are they supposed to do in the meantime? All these guys are old, man. Are they supposed to just wait around for this guy to get better? You can't necessarily do that at their age, man. You gotta grab the bull by the horns, and while you still got a chance, and you got to do what you can do, while you can do it. I mean, and Ozzy Osbourne is a good example. Of course, he's the leader of any band that he's in, but what if he wasn't? What if he was just the side man? And what is everybody else meant to do? Just wait on him, without moving on? Let me know what you think down below on this Aerosmith thing. I just thought this was kind of interesting. I'm sure there probably are some of you guys even that might have experiences like this, where a guy is just, he wants to be in the band badly, and you don't want to let him go either. But at the same time, at some point you kind of got to move on. You got to say, we've got to start a new chapter here with somebody else, because it's just not working out. Especially after the guy sues you. You know what I mean? It's kind of not a good way to start a good conversation. That's all I'm saying. I know some of you guys are not going to agree with me on this, but I'd have to side with the band on this one, because like I said, they just don't have enough time left. Life is too short. And if the guy isn't capable of even coming to the rehearsals that you invite him to, then, all bets are off as far as I'm concerned. So, okay, so that will do it for the news. Alright guys, that'll do it for Shitpost Friday. I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, hit subscribe down below, hit the bell for notifications. Also go over to my channel too if you haven't already, and subscribe over there. I have several videos actually that I've completed that are not really, I don't think, suitable for channel 1, so I'll probably shoot those over on channel 2. I've also got some stuff coming up, some amp repairs in the works right now. I'm about halfway through probably 2 or 3 different things that I've kind of been messing with here, so eventually I'm sure I'll get one of those finished and completed and uploaded, so stick around for that. And for now, y'all take care.